So it's time to bring your buyers to closing. How can you help them be prepared for closing day? Today's video is going over what to expect. Okay, awesome, great job. You got your buyers under contract, they've done their inspection, they got their appraisal back, the lender's done their underwriting, and it is time to close. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to help your buyers be prepared for closing day. It starts with, in my mind, reviewing the lender's closing disclosure with your client. The lender's going to send out a closing disclosure typically 3 or more days prior to closing, and that's going to tell your buyers how much they're borrowing, at what interest rate, what their payment's going to be, what their escrow amounts are, what the various lender charges are, things of that nature. Now, keep in mind, most lenders are going to review that with their buyers, but it is helpful if you have an understanding of what they're looking at and kind of go over that with them. It reduces the surprises for the buyer when they come into closing. So you review the closing disclosure with your buyer. On the closing disclosure, it's going to tell your buyer how much they need to send in for their buyer closing funds. So these are the funds that are required from your buyer to cover their down payment, their closing costs, any of the costs that haven't been covered by the lender. It's really important for your buyer to initiate this wire as early as possible. Often, it is a funding requirement of the lender that the borrower's funds have been received. What I'm talking about is the lender has certain boxes that need to be checked before they will allow us to release keys to your buyer. And one of those is we have to have received that buyer's funds. So the earlier you can initiate that wire, the better. I can't speak for all title companies, most title companies, True Title included, require the buyer's funds to be wired in. The reason for this is that we have to receive these funds prior to closing. They cannot be withdrawn, as an ACH can sometimes be disputed or withdrawn, and it has to have cleared the bank, meaning we can't take a personal check because it has to have cleared the bank. So we require a wire, and again, I think that's pretty true across the industry, can't speak for everyone. Okay, wire's been initiated, you show up for closing. Definitely have your buyer prepared that they're going to be here for a little bit. I mean, we all, True Title included, do our best to get the buyers in and out as quickly as possible, but it's a big deal. Your buyer is signing important legal documents that they need to understand. It takes us time to go over those. Also, the lender has to review documents once they've been signed, and we have to wait for the lender to provide funding approval. So just know and be prepared and maybe prepare your buyer that it could take an hour, hour and a half, depending on the lender. We do our best to do it as quickly as possible, but as I stated, it is an important legal process that we need to be sure that everything is done properly. Okay, so now the buyer's ready to come to closing. Make sure that they know they should bring 2 forms of ID. Not all lenders require 2 forms of ID. All require 1 form of ID and some require 2. So it's just a best practice to ask them to bring 2 forms of ID. ID being a driver's license, passport, military ID. So it's just a best practice to ask your clients to bring 2 forms of ID. Now you're at the closing table. What's going to happen next? So the closer will come in with your lender package to sign. Depending on the lender, they may have what's called funding documents. And what that means is a subset of their lender docs that they want to see prior to allowing for funding authorization. At True Title, our practice is to take those funding documents and separate them, have the buyer sign them first. Then we step out, we send those documents to the lender so the lender can be reviewing those documents while we finish the rest of the closing. That way, when we get done with closing, we can check in with the lender. Hopefully, they've already had an opportunity to review those funding documents. Just speeds things up a little bit. Once all the documents are signed, we check in with the lender to determine if we've received funding authorization. Once we receive funding authorization, the party is on. We are done. We are ready to close and fund, and your buyer will have keys released to them. We provide the buyer with the option of receiving a copy of their documents electronically or a physical, paper copy, or both. And so we provide them with those documents. We all shake hands. You receive your commission check, and we're all on our way. So there you go. That is what you and your buyer can expect on closing day. If you have any questions, please feel free to call. I'm Clay Lehman with True Title of Central Florida, and we are here to make your life easier.